Tetsuo Tosu is a hard-working office worker and father to a young daughter. He casually invites her for lunch at a family restaurant as he hadn't seen her in a while. Arriving early at the restaurant, Tetsuo waits for his daughter, Reika, to show up. Moments later, a girl wearing a surgical mask and a cap hiding her face sits in front of Tetsuo. Almost immediately, Tetsuo breaks the ice by joking about Reika's unusual fashion choice. Ignoring her father's jokes, Reika asks him what he wanted to discuss. Before starting the conversation, Tetsuo tells Reika to remove her mask and cap. When Reika complies with her father's request, Tetsuo's eyes widen in shock upon seeing his daughter's face covered in bruises. Upon asking her about the cause of the marks, Reika tells him that she got them after falling down the stairs. Doubting her excuse, Tetsuo asks if it was her boyfriend. Without answering him, Reika gathers her things and storms off, leaving her father calling after her. The next day, Tetsuo decides to visit Reika's apartment. Before entering the building, Tetsuo passes by a group of delinquents and overhears part of their conversation. The thug in a yellow shirt proudly tells his friends how he claps his girlfriend's cheeks both ways. After praising him for his actions, they ask for his girlfriend's name. When the man says Reika's name, Tetsuo recalls his daughter's distressed face. Filled with rage, Tetsuo decides to follow the group of troublemakers. Soon he finds himself in front of a suspicious building. As Tetsuo sees the delinquents enter, he is stopped by a man in glasses who forcefully drags him into an alleyway. After stripping Tetsuo and clapping his cheeks, the man maliciously takes his pictures of him and threatens to leak them if he goes to the police. They then leaves Tetsuo to deal with the consequences. Later, Tetsuo finds himself at Reika's apartment again. Using a spare key, he tries to convince himself that his daughter would never associate with such scum. Not long after, Tetsuo hears the vile voice of Nobuto Matori in the hallway. Taking cover in a closet, Tetsuo listens to Nobuto on the phone, with someone revealing his evil plans to extort Reika's money. On the phone, Nobuto casually talks about how he disposed of his past girlfriends. Suddenly, he flies into a rage upon learning that he was followed by Tetsuo the previous day. As Nobuto violently thrashes around the apartment, Tetsuo decides to warn his daughter when his phone slips out of his hand. To prevent Nobuto from opening the closet door, Tetsuo calls him on his cell phone. Upon answering, Nobuto angrily threatens to kill him. Tetsuo responds by daring him to come and try if he's brave enough. Knowing he can't take Nobuto with just his strength, Tetsuo uses the element of surprise. He cleverly lures Nobuto to open the closet door, and when Nobuto foolishly complies, Tetsuo bursts out of the closet. In seconds, Tetsuo grabs a rice cooker and uses it to whoop Nobuto's ass to death for good. Suddenly, the door opens, and Tetsuo faces his wife, Kasen. Sitting beside her husband, Kasen asks if they can claim self-defense. Tetsuo tells her that since Nobuto has killed 2 people before, it's likely he has yakuza support. As the panic begins to settle in Tetsuo, Kasen lovingly reassures him by suggesting they could relocate Nobuto's body far from the yakuza's reach. Outside, a boy relays parts of the conversation inside the apartment to a man named Kubo. Suddenly, old man Kubo alerts the boy about Reika's presence. As Reika enters her apartment, she is greeted by her parents. Tetsuo tells her she could stay with her mother for the night, as he had the misfortune of encountering her boyfriend who seemed furious. Once Kasen and Reika leave, Kubo orders the boy to search the apartment. As the door handle rattles violently, Tetsuo begins to panic. Elsewhere, Yoshitatsu Matori, the sovereign head of the organization, orders Kubo to find Nobuto, as he is his only family. Kyoichi enters the apartment and finds Tetsuo scrubbing the bathroom floors. He nervously tells Kyoichi that he is the hired help that cleans the apartment for Reika. Startled by the whole situation, Kyoichi lies, saying he's a friend of Nobuto who had a spare key. Shortly after leaving the apartment, Kyoichi is ordered by Kubo to keep an eye on Reika. Meanwhile, in the apartment, Tetsuo breathes a sigh of relief after his encounter with Kyoichi. Kasen enters the apartment with a suitcase and tells her husband that she brought everything he asked for. Tetsuo thanks Kasen for her help and tells her to go home and prepare a meal for Reika. Alone in the apartment, Tetsuo gets to the grim task of disposing of Nobuto's body. After a long day, Tetsuo returns home, where he tells Reika to stay with them for a week. The suggestion is met with little protest as the Tosu family sits down to enjoy a game of poker. The next day, Tetsuo begins working on the second phase of his plan. With the bones and flesh still to dispose of, he plans to leave early when his wife stops him. Kasen brings Tetsuo's attention to a suspicious car parked outside their house. Recalling his walk home, Tetsuo concludes they are being watched by the yakuza. He goes to a store to deal with Nobuto's remains. Once inside, yakuza members open his car to search for clues to find Nobuto. When the suitcase opens to reveal Tetsuo's clothes, the men quickly leave. Tetsuo returns to his car and immediately realizes the suitcase has been tampered with. After returning home, Tetsuo tells Kasen they must dispose of the remains by putting them in a compost bin. As the plan sets in motion, Doichi signals his lackey, Shingo, to talk to Tetsuo and Kasen. While Shingo engages the couple in conversation, Kyoichi infiltrates the house to search for evidence. After wrapping up the conversation, Tetsuo suddenly realizes the back door was left open. When Kyoichi, who had hidden in the closet, sees the couple rush back inside, he concludes that while they appear to be a normal couple, something is off about them. The next afternoon, Kasen finds a listening device. She immediately goes to Tetsuo, who uses the device to their advantage by creating a story about an obsessed stalker who has been in love with Reika. With Kyoichi and his goons listening intently, the couple deftly discuss how they think Reika's lover was abducted by the stalker. While walking home from work, Tetsuo is suddenly apprehended by the yakuza. Similarly, Kasen is overpowered at her home. 3 nights after Nobuto's murder, Tetsuo returns to Reika's apartment to get rid of the stench. Meanwhile, Kyoichi informs Kubo about Tetsuo's whereabouts and tells him that the stalker story by Kasen and Tetsuo was a lie. Once Tetsuo comes out of the apartment, Kyoichi and his men seize the opportunity to kidnap him. They take him to an abandoned building, where Kyoichi proceeds to torment him. He then questions him about the stalker story, to which Tetsuo responds that it happened last year when his wife noticed an old man lurking around Reika. Without disturbing their daughter, they hired a private investigator, Suzuki, who confirmed their suspicions. Upon hearing the name, Kyoichi's eyes widen as he recalls the cleaner at Reika's apartment who introduced himself as Suzuki. Kyoichi's father tortures Tetsuo by suspending him in the air. He then questions him about Nobuto. Tetsuo anxiously explains that he heard from Suzuki about Nobuto's fight with Reika and thus warned his daughter not to stay at the apartment that night. After listening to Tetsuo, Kyoichi says they will believe his story after confirming with his wife. When Tetsuo desperately asks if they'll be allowed to go afterward, Kyoichi tells him that since they've wasted so much time on them, they will have to die regardless. At the Tosu household, Kasen tells the same story to a group of masked men. She also realizes that the men might be connected with Nobuto's gang, but they aren't part of it. Once their questions are met with Kasen's riddles, the men decide to leave. With no other options, Kyoichi tells Tetsuo he needs to die. Realizing that Kyoichi will use his body to frame him as Nobuto's murderer, Tetsuo says they can work together to find Nobuto. Tetsuo greets his wife and reveals that thanks to her participation, they've been cleared of suspicions. While looking at Kasen's relieved face, Tetsuo recalls his conversation with Kyoichi in the abandoned building. Kyoichi warns him that if he fails to find Nobuto by Friday, he will kill him and frame him as Nobuto's murderer. After returning home, Tetsuo plans his next moves, considering 3 options: revealing everything to the police, framing someone else for Nobuto's murder, or creating a fake reality where Nobuto is still alive. Tetsuo thinks hard to decide his next step. The following night, Tetsuo meets with Kyoichi. In the car, Kyoichi tells him that had he been a second late, he would have sent his nude photo to everyone in his contact list. The men then silently head to a cafe, where Kyoichi introduces Tetsuo to a girl named Hibiki, saying she's Nobuto's woman. Hearing this, Tetsuo feels a surge of anger for his daughter. After calming down, Tetsuo asks Hibiki about Nobuto. She says that once Nobuto cheated on her with 4 different girls, but when she tried breaking up with him, he apologized and told her she was the one for him. When Tetsuo reveals Nobuto was involved with another girl, Hibiki says she knows that Nobuto was dating Reika. But it was purely for work, as Nobuto hated being intimate with her. Unable to control his anger, Tetsuo excuses himself. In the bathroom, he thinks about how he wants to kill Nobuto. Unfortunately, he can't kill a man twice. After returning to the table, Tetsuo manages to gain Hibiki's trust and learns that Nobuto betrayed his organization by robbing a car they were planning to steal. Suddenly, a group of men, accompanied by Kyoichi, surround their table. After cuffing Tetsuo and Kyoichi, a man in glasses forces them to steal a bag from 2 violent gangs. In the car, Kyoichi tells Tetsuo that he knows he killed Nobuto, which is why he paired up with him. When Kyoichi and Tetsuo are signaled to move, the men enter the scene with bullets raining down. Luckily, Tetsuo manages to pull Kyoichi out of the car before it catches fire. While running to safety, Kyoichi starts losing blood from gun wounds. Tetsuo lays him down and says he can't die just yet. Hearing this, Kyoichi snaps at him, saying he's more sinister than he thinks. Suddenly, an armed man appears in front of them. Before the man can pose a threat to Tetsuo or Kyoichi, Kubo takes him down with a single bullet. He then patches up Kyoichi and orders Tetsuo to stand in front of the camera and admit to killing the man. After recording the video, Kubo smirks and says he can extort more money from Tetsuo's parents with the footage. Once Tetsuo gets home, Kasen asks what he's been up to. When he responds with a lie, she angrily tells him he's part of the family too. so he should take care of himself. Hearing this, Tetsuo reveals that the organization has been monitoring him, and if they don't find Nobuto soon, they will frame him for his murder. Kasen worriedly asks about their next move. Tetsuo then says he is thinking about fabricating evidence to prove Nobuto is alive. For this, they hire an old friend, Tabata, to create a video as proof of Nobuto's well-being. Then, to log into Nobuto's SNS account, Tetsuo heads to Nobuto's favorite restaurant to find clues regarding his password. There, he bumps into none other than Yoshitatsu Matori, who ominously tells him that if someone tries to hurt his child, he'll kill everyone in his path. Once that man takes his leave, Tetsuo asks the bartender about Nobuto. When he learns that the man he was talking to earlier is Nobuto's father, Tetsuo's eyes widen in horror. After his brief interaction with Yoshitatsu, the gravity of his crime dawns upon him. Tetsuo thinks about all the people who loved and believed in Nobuto, which ends up making him cry. In the car, Yoshitatsu tells Kubo that if they're unable to find his son, Nobuto, then he will leave the organization. Upon hearing that, Kubo tries to reason with him by saying that if he leaves, the organization's income will drop by 30%. All of a sudden, Kubo gets a call from someone who informs him about a video on Nobuto's private SNS. Elsewhere, Yoichi drags Tetsuo, telling him that a video of Nobuto has appeared. He takes him to a factory where workers analyze the video's authenticity. Tetsuo thinks about how he has Plan B in motion if Plan A fails. Soon, a man rushes in, announcing that the video is fake, as the man in it has a different style of walking. Suspecting Nobuto's murder, Kyoichi drags Tetsuo out, saying he'll search his house for evidence. After entering the Tosu household, Kyoichi immediately tells Tetsuo to empty the compost bin. Knowing that Nobuto would have turned to dirt by now, Tetsuo adheres to the orders. As Kyoichi starts searching through the soil, Tetsuo suddenly notices a strand of Nobuto's hair. Afraid Kyoichi will find the hair, Tetsuo contemplates killing him, when suddenly, Kasen invites Kyoichi for a cup of coffee. After drinking the coffee, Kyoichi blatantly tells Kasen that he is from the organization. In the loo, Kasen informs Tetsuo that she put laxatives in the coffee. With Tetsuo's own stomach doing somersaults, he quickly puts spyware on Kyoichi's laptop and rushes outside to take a dump. After clearing his stomach, Kyoichi comes out of the bathroom and bumps into Reika. Kyoichi glares at Reika and cynically says that she must be worried sick about her boyfriend's disappearance. With that, he picks up his laptop bag and exits the room, leaving Reika both surprised and confused. With only Kasen present in the room, Reika loudly asks why she would tell a strange man about Nobuto. Unable to answer, Kasen starts to stutter. Luckily, Tetsuo walks in and saves Kasen by saying they confided in Kyoichi because they were seeking advice on how to keep her away from bad men. When Reika presses the subject, Kasen adds another lie, stating Kyoichi is a famous womanizer in her dad's company. Once Reika buys the lies, Kasen and Tetsuo go out to see off Kyoichi. Kasen extends a tissue roll to Kyoichi, who grumpily tells her to leave him alone. As Kyoichi takes Tetsuo with him, Kasen, using the bug, starts listening to their conversation. She grumbles when Kyoichi calls her annoying, and her husband agrees. When Kasen reads through Kyoichi's emails, Reika finds Kyoichi's note inside her shoe. Inside the note, Kyoichi asks her to contact him as her parents are hiding something. Meanwhile, Kasen turns pale upon learning that the organization plans on killing her husband to frame him for Nobuto's murder. Kasen concludes that the goal is to stop Yoshitatsu from leaving the organization. On the other hand, Kyoichi asks Tetsuo to open the door to Reika's apartment. Once inside, Tetsuo has flashbacks of his crimes. Meanwhile, Kasen stops by Kyoichi's house and meets his old mother. Posing as a salesperson, Kasen learns from Kyoichi's mother that Kyoichi's father killed himself after being backed into a corner by a crime syndicate. As the woman tells Kasen that the only reason she was able to go on after her husband's death was Kyoichi's promise to open a diner with her, Kasen rethinks her moves. She went to Kyoichi's house to frame him as Nobuto's murderer. In the end, Kasen leaves, clutching Nobuto's remains and a tablet that could paint Kyoichi as the mastermind behind the murder. Inside Reika's apartment, Kyoichi smiles wickedly as Reika responds to the note. Kasen logs back into Kyoichi's emails and discovers the conversation between him and Reika. Once Reika agrees to meet Kyoichi, Kasen curses her hesitance in removing Kyoichi. With that, she concludes that he's in the way after all. Meanwhile, Kyoichi handcuffs Tetsuo and says he's stepping out for a bit. Once he leaves, Kasen fills in her husband on Kyoichi's conversation with Reika. Once Kasen comes over with evidence of Nobuto's murder, Tetsuo devises a plan to plant the evidence in Kyoichi's apartment, while Kasen will handle Reika. However, as Tetsuo reaches Kyoichi's building, his eyes widen in fear when he sees Kyoichi appearing from the elevator. A close call with Kyoichi makes Tetsuo realize he needs to be more vigilant. Meanwhile, Kasen greets Reika and inquires about her plans. Reika tries her best to dodge Kasen's sharp questions by saying she's meeting a college friend. Not one to relent, Kasen says she will wait and say hello to her friend. When Reika tells her to go home, Kasen manages to use the situation to her advantage by crying loudly. In the end, Reika caves in. At Kyoichi's apartment building, Kasen tells Tetsuo that she was successful in her mission. After the call, Tetsuo hurries toward Kyoichi's apartment. When the plan to break into Kyoichi's apartment using the thumb turn tool fails, Tetsuo decides to use the roof. However, upon reaching the terrace, he realizes in disappointment that he doesn't have the right tools to break into Kyoichi's apartment. A glimpse of Kasen and Reika's faces fills Tetsuo with hope again. Returning to Reika's apartment, Tetsuo handcuffs himself. When Kyoichi returns, Tetsuo picks up on his foul mood and asks if everything is okay. Instead of answering, Kyoichi asks Tetsuo why he looks so fatigued. Tetsuo explains that he struggled to free himself from the handcuffs. Kyoichi then searches for Nobuto's bloodstains using an ALS light. He becomes upset when nothing appears and contacts his assistant to verify the ALS light's quality. After denying his accusations, the assistant informs him that he left the envelope he emailed about in his mailbox. When Kyoichi asks him to forward the mail, he looks at Tetsuo and wonders if Tetsuo sent the email. He reasons with himself, noting that Tetsuo's GPS didn't detect any movements and he didn't sound off on the phone. Tetsuo then asks Kyoichi if he had an argument with Takeda. When Kyoichi asks for details, Tetsuo reveals that one of the two guys watching him said that Takeda suspects Kyoichi as Nobuto's murderer. To plant more doubts, Tetsuo suggests that perhaps Takeda sent the mysterious email. When Kyoichi tries to dismiss these thoughts, Tetsuo suddenly begs him to go back to his apartment, believing something is happening behind their backs. It turns out that an hour ago, Tetsuo switched Kyoichi's ALS light with a black light. In the present, Kyoichi drags a handcuffed Tetsuo to his apartment to search for the envelope. Tetsuo learns about Kyoichi's living situation while pretending to cooperate. Sensing something off, Kyoichi calls Tetsuo out, saying that in reality, Tetsuo wants him to be framed. Tetsuo lies, saying he wants Takeda to take the fall for Nobuto's murder. Kyoichi scoffs, stating he'll never work with Tetsuo. Suddenly, Tetsuo's mind floods with memories of his father's words, echoing the somber truth that the justice system can falter. As Tetsuo's eyes water, Kyoichi asks if he is okay. Tetsuo explains that he has just been through a lot. A loud grumble escapes Tetsuo's stomach, and he nervously suggests they eat something as it could be their last meal. He shares that his parents died in a pileup accident, and his father was an honest police officer. Kyoichi stares knowingly, having previously done a background check on Tetsuo. Kyoichi announces he will prepare a meal. Tetsuo pleads with him to make his death look like an accident or suicide, so Reika won't be burdened. Later, the two men meet with Takeda, who berates Kyoichi for not finding any incriminating evidence against Tetsuo. Suddenly, Takeda stands up in shock upon receiving an email. He tells his lackeys to keep an eye on Kyoichi and orders Tetsuo to follow him outside. Outside, Takeda asks Tetsuo about his time with Kyoichi. The email claimed that Nobuto and Kyoichi masterminded robbing the vehicle the organization targeted. With the information Tetsuo provides, Takeda orders a search of Kyoichi's place. When Kyoichi realizes he is being framed, he grabs Tetsuo by the throat. Luckily, Takeda kicks him and tells him to prove his innocence. Outside Kyoichi's building, Takeda greets Kubo. Together, they confirm whether Kyoichi was involved in the robbery. While ruling out that possibility, they discover a mysterious bag behind the safe. Kyoichi pleads with Kubo, claiming ignorance about the bag. As Takeda empties the bag, the group stares in horror upon discovering piles of bones. After confirming the bones belong to Nobuto, Kyoichi desperately pleads with Kubo, blaming Takeda and Tetsuo. Kubo calmly tells Takeda to bring Kyoichi's body to Yoshitatsu in a body bag. As the men gag Kyoichi, Tetsuo looks at him with pity. It turns out that Tetsuo told Takeda that Kyoichi was nervously looking for hidden devices in the apartment. While Kyoichi was in the bathroom, Tetsuo had Kasen send the email to Takeda and plant the evidence in Kyoichi's apartment. As Takeda allows Tetsuo to leave, Tetsuo takes one last look at Kyoichi. He realizes that Kyoichi's downfall was due to his isolation, whereas Tetsuo survived because Kasen helped him. It's revealed that Tetsuo guided Kasen in breaking into Kyoichi's apartment, helping her choose the appropriate tools. Having successfully infiltrated the room, Tetsuo swiftly instructs Kasen to utilize the ASL light to crack open the safe. The ASL light's remarkable ability to detect fingerprints proves invaluable. Pure luck helps Kasen unlock the safe. Meanwhile, Kyoichi refuses to submit to a terrible fate. After violently throwing off the man holding him down, Kyoichi uses his last bit of cash to create a diversion. As people clamor in the streets to hoard the money falling from the sky, Kyoichi takes the opportunity to escape. After creating a safe distance between himself and Takeda's men, a wounded Kyoichi reflects on the scratch marks he saw on the door. Meanwhile, Tetsuo enters Reika's apartment, recalling the bizarre events of the past week. While lying down, he distracts himself by thinking about his past, present, and future. He then opens the window for Kasen to execute the next part of their plan. Back at the Tosu residence, Reika reveals that she just realized she saw Kyoichi lingering in the hallway on the day of Nobuto's disappearance. Moreover, she heard from a friend that a guy was asking about her. Reika concludes her speculation by stating that Kyoichi is her stalker. Upon hearing that, Kasen sighs in relief. Kasen then calls Yoshitatsu, who remarks on her nerve to call him. Kyoichi pleads his innocence, stating that Tetsuo killed Nobuto. Realizing Tetsuo must have had Kasen as a collaborator, Kyoichi smirks and quickly dials Yoshitatsu. He warns that if Yoshitatsu trusts the organization's verdict, the real killer will roam free. He adds that after the organization learned Nobuto was behind the robbery, they lost interest in finding him and plan to frame someone to appease Yoshitatsu. After ending the call, Yoshitatsu goes berserk and trashes his office. He then calmly rings Kubo, instructing him to retrieve something for him. Meanwhile, Tetsuo wakes up to the sound of the door rattling. Taking cover, he discovers Yoshitatsu has entered the apartment with an ASL light. Yoshitatsu's eyes widen upon seeing blood splattered across the floor. He immediately falls and cries while hugging the floor, filling Tetsuo with more guilt. When the ASL light reveals more bloodstains on the cupboard, Yoshitatsu loudly asks if Tetsuo is inside. With his hiding spot blown, Tetsuo comes out and admits his crimes. Yoshitatsu gets up, declaring he will kill Tetsuo and his family. Tetsuo pleads with him to spare his family, but Yoshitatsu remains adamant, recalling his vow to kill anyone who harmed Nobuto and their family. He tells Tetsuo that had he known he was the culprit, he would have ended him the same night they met. When Tetsuo tries one last time to persuade him, Yoshitatsu graphically describes what he will do to Tetsuo's wife and daughter. As he proceeds to call Kubo, Tetsuo attacks. A fight ensues, with Yoshitatsu using pepper spray on Tetsuo, who does not falter. Kubo calls Doi, Yoshitatsu's driver, to ask about Yoshitatsu's mood. When Doi states Yoshitatsu appeared in a foul mood, Kubo decides not to meddle further. As the fight between Tetsuo and Yoshitatsu intensifies, neighbors call the police. Yoshitatsu wraps a wire around Tetsuo's throat, telling him to give in. While suffocating Tetsuo, Yoshitatsu narrates his life, detailing how his parents neglected him and forced him to work hard. After graduating, they made him marry a woman of their choosing. Even when his wife got pregnant, he received no love. He started to grow hopeful after Nobuto's birth, but gave up on life when Nobuto was sent to juvenile prison for violence. The organization scouted him, convincing him to restart his life for Nobuto's sake. As Tetsuo breaks the wire, Yoshitatsu breaks down, asking where he went wrong. Faltering, Yoshitatsu grabs a knife and pushes it into his abdomen, just as a knock interrupts Tetsuo's raging thoughts. Two policemen outside ask Tetsuo to open the door. Concluding he can't get caught yet, Tetsuo grabs Yoshitatsu to prevent him from making any noise. The suffocation leads to Yoshitatsu's demise. Tetsuo tells the police his daughter's hamster is on the loose, so he can't open the door. The police, clueless, believe his story and leave. Tetsuo then informs Kasen he will be late. As Kasen tells Reika that her father will be home late, she mentions how Tetsuo has always looked after her and how he better hurry home. Meanwhile, Tetsuo enters a forest, where he digs a hole to bury Yoshitatsu. While covering up his sins, he wonders if he will ever be forgiven. Tetsuo returns home, greeted by an overwhelmed Kasen. He takes her into his arms, allowing her to weep. Things return to normalcy for the Tosu family for now. Well, that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked it, subscribe to the channel, share with the homies, and I'll be uploading a lot more unhinged recaps just like this. So I'll see you at the next one.